The market is in a massive bubble, and when it eventually pops, it'll finally be affordable for everybody. And all the people who currently rent will be able to buy a home, and everybody who's been waiting for the bubble to pop since 1983 will finally be able to get into the market. This is the rhetoric that I hear on a daily basis in my YouTube comments, TikTok comments, and just about everywhere all over the internet, Facebook groups, you name it. And I think that this probably isn't the case for a multitude of reasons. So the first thing I'll say is that there's no guarantee that we are actually in a bubble, and I can see the comments already. So let me preface this by saying that yes, real estate can crash. Yes, we are always at a risk of a crash, and we may be in a bubble, right? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that no one has been able to show me definitive evidence to say definitively, yes, we are in a bubble. You know, in the stock market, when you have a stock, you can look at its projected earnings, and based on how much money it's projected to earn, you can kind of come to the conclusion and how much the stock price has ran up recently that, you know, that stock is trading rich, or it's overvalued, or it's in a bubble, and we don't really have anything like that in real estate. It's just not that simple. Like, everyone likes to use this chart here, the price to income ratios of the US versus Canada, and obviously it looks extremely terrible, right? Like, our incomes are completely detached from home prices. But I don't think this metric is the end-all be-all, or this indicator is the end-all be-all to say we are in a bubble. And the reason why, for starters, is that 25% of our housing stock is located in Toronto, the GTA, and Greater Vancouver. There's about 9 million people, just over 9 million people that live in those two areas, and those two areas are very expensive. And basically everywhere outside of those two areas in the rest of Canada is actually affordable. For reference, an affordable price to income ratio is about 5. And currently, right now, Calgary is a 6, Winnipeg is a 6, Edmonton is a 3.8, and then in the States, just for some contrast, you have most of the cities in California sitting at 9, Seattle, Portland at 6, and then most of the northeastern United States is at a 7 or higher, like, New York, Boston, Columbus, Ohio. Pretty much every city in that area is 7 to like 10. But you have a very large portion of the overall housing supply being located, like 25% of the housing supply basically, or the population living in these two areas, which is going to push up the overall average price of a home in Canada. Now, to add to this, and why I don't like this price to income ratio as the holy grail for why we're in a bubble, is that 43% of homeowners in Toronto own their home mortgage-free, and 50% in Vancouver own their home mortgage-free. So in the two most expensive areas where the price to income ratios are heavily detached, 50% of the people who own homes don't even have a mortgage, which means that that metric, or that indicator that we use to determine whether or not we're in a bubble, is completely invalidated when 50% of the people living there don't even have a mortgage payment, right? So let's talk about specifically Vancouver, being that is the most expensive. 50% of people who own homes own them without a mortgage. 32% of the homes owned in Vancouver are owned by investors, meaning that yes, the price to income ratio comes into play to get a mortgage. However, they aren't the ones actually paying that mortgage. They're probably, maybe they pay $700 to $1,200 a month out of pocket in negative cash flow, but they're not servicing the full debt payment of what it is to own that property. So 82% of the housing stock isn't actually paying the mortgage for owning that home. And basically what we're left with is 18% of homes that are purchased in Vancouver actually have a mortgage on them that the person living in the home is paying. Now, I'm willing to bet that within that 18%, a bunch of those people are probably in the upper echelon of income earners. They're probably earning more than the average household income. And on top of that, a good portion of them are probably putting down more than 20% or getting gifted down payments from the people who own $2 million homes outright with no mortgage at all. Now, again, I'm not saying we're in a bubble. I'm basically just invalidating this one chart or metric that everyone uses to say that we are in a bubble. So if you can find a better one that shows that we are definitively in a bubble, I'm happy to look into it and possibly cover it in this channel. And the next thing that I hear is that if real estate did crash, it'd be affordable for everybody and everybody can finally get in and everyone who rents would finally be able to afford a home, so on and so forth. And in my opinion, this is extremely wishful thinking. Real estate, especially in Vancouver, I can't speak for Toronto. I'm not a Toronto realtor. I don't research that market too much, but I can say very confidently that Vancouver will never be affordable ever again. And it definitely won't be affordable to the average person. It just doesn't make sense. And in my opinion, for Vancouver to be affordable, what you're basically saying, how this would have to go down is that for Vancouver to be affordable, basically all of the other provinces like Calgary's a city, but Alberta, Manitoba, Quebec, whatever, all of these other places would also have to come down significantly in price. And the reason why is that there has to be a price gap maintained between, say, Vancouver and Calgary. For Vancouver to be affordable again, we need like a 60% drop in price, because right now we're at a 14x price to income ratio if we're using that as the metric for affordability, meaning we need to come down like 60% or whatever it is to get to that 5x multiplier, meaning that a condo in Vancouver would basically have to go from $700,000 to $280,000. Now, if you could buy a condo in downtown Vancouver for $280,000, why would anybody live in Edmonton? Why would anyone live in Calgary? Why would anyone live anywhere else in Calgary if you could buy a condo in Vancouver for $280,000? If you could buy a $1.5 million detached home in Coquitlam for $600K, why would you live in Edmonton? Now, obviously, there are some reasons why people will live in Calgary or Edmonton, but I'm just going to the extreme to try to prove this point here, is that if Vancouver ever dropped to that point where the gap between those places closed in, then you would have a whole rush of people moving from those provinces to, seize the opportunity to now move into Vancouver, and that would bid the prices back up rather quickly before we ever got to a point where those two places were like roughly trading at the same price. And then you have Calgary. Calgary's already trading at a 6 times price to income ratio, meaning that it's already affordable. So to get Calgary to drop a significant amount would be pretty difficult. To get Edmonton to drop a significant amount from a 3.x price to income ratio multiplier would be significantly difficult. And in my opinion, they would probably have to drop if Vancouver were to drop a whole bunch, right? Now, I guess there could be a scenario where Vancouver dropped very quickly and then Calgary stayed like this, and then you could probably buy at that point. But I think that window would be very short-lived because, like I said, you'd have a bunch of people interprovincially migrating from everywhere else to then buy into Vancouver, and that gap would get bid back up. So just based on like a contrast standpoint from where Vancouver should sit in price in comparison to everywhere else that's already affordable, it makes sense how unaffordable it is based on that. And the next thing is that real estate has never been easy to buy into. And even when the prices do come down, like we just saw in the last year and a half, it somehow manages to become harder to purchase real estate. Like it literally gets more unaffordable when the prices come down somehow. And aside from like a few small windows in time, like 2020, where, prices came down a little bit and then interest rates dropped significantly, you had this small window of time to buy into real estate where it actually was more affordable. However, at that time, you were battling with the market sentiment that like the world might literally be over. And in my opinion, that's where the lie that's being told comes from, is that it will be easier to buy real estate later on at some point. It may be more affordable. However, it historically usually isn't, but there are a few time periods where it actually does become more affordable for a very short period of time. However, one thing that I know for certain is that it will never be easier to buy real estate. And the reason why is even when it does become more affordable, the market sentiment at that time would have to be completely terrible for that market condition to even exist in the first place. So are we in a bubble? I don't know. I don't have any way to actually tell if we are. I mean, we have a bunch of indicators that might suggest that we might be, but nothing that definitively says that we are, right? This is not Facebook stock trading at an 85 PE ratio. That would be clear as day that we're probably in a bubble, right? Real estate doesn't really have that. And secondly, is real estate going to be so affordable that everyone can buy into the market at some point? Probably not. And if it ever was, most people won't buy into the market because the market sentiment that would exist at that time will likely be terrible. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm that Agent Kelly. I'm making moves to move you. Peace.